So we have, I think we have new Makomos, right? We have new Makomos.
Yes, printed them out a few minutes ago.
We have Myra McComas.
Dr. Present is keeping me honest as always.
Yes.
We missed you for a couple of weeks. I think.
Oh, thank you.
I had no bet.
I'm also comparing them to the Maramakomos when we did get them a number of years ago.
Are they overlapping or not?
There's some, but there's wonderfully a lot of new stuff.
Yeah. Well, the topics are going to overlap, but we always try to do,
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, because sometimes you don't remember, have I heard this exactly this way before? And with the Maramakomos, you can actually pinpoint that answer.
Okay, sounds interesting. Anyways, it's good to have you back.
Thank you.
You give us stability, and
Oh, thank you.
right, and just it's always good to have you. Okay, so let's talk about let's talk a little bit about where we were. So again, we've been discussing the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir, whether Eidei Mesira Karsi or Eidei Chasima Karsi. And what we've been trying to explain is that there's a very fundamental argument among the Rishonim whether or not this is a mutually exclusive argument in both directions or only in one direction. Which means the following: the Balei Tosas have the opinion, which we'll go back to in just a moment, that if you hold Eidei Mesira Karsi, let's start the other way. Just as if you held Eidei Chasima Karsi, which means that the signatures in a contract are what make the contract binding and effective, the fact that it is a signed contract, the fact that the witnesses are etched into the document. If that's really what makes the shtar, what makes the get in a case of gittin a get, so that's non-negotiable. If the edim are not, signed in the document, good to see the chazan. They're not signed in the document, but they are simply, let's say, if they were present at the time of the handing over of the shtar, that would not be good enough. That is the position of Rabbi Meir. There's almost a consensus among the authorities that that's what Rabbi Meir holds, that his view of Eidei Chasima Karsi is the only way to go. However, the debate revolves around the competing position of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer holds Eidei Mesira Karsi, which means that what makes a shtar is the physical presence of witnesses at the time of the handing over of the text, and that the edim do not need to be signed on the document, but they do need to be present. However, here's where you have the debate. So the Rif is of the opinion that even though Rabbi Meir rejects Rabbi Eliezer does not reject Rabbi Meir, meaning Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion, according to the Rif, that either Eidei Chasima alone will work or Eidei Mesira alone, one or the other. But, you don't need both. If you have both, it's even better, because the Eidei Mesira, according to the Rif, are Ikar. They're the main ones, but the Eidei Chasima add a function of Raya, meaning if they really do sign on to the shtar, then you can then produce that get or that shtar in Bezdin. You don't need any further evidence to move forward. That's what the Mishnah means when it says that Ein ha'edim chosmim ala get elam mipnei tikun olam. That's the Mishnah on Pei Vav Omid Aleph, and again earlier on the base. What's that?
But he can't explain the af that's missing.
Well, this is what we'll review this for in a minute, but this is part of the correct. One of the linguistic question, correct, that the Bala Ma'or and Rabbeinu Ephraim and others ask against the Rif is if he really thinks that according to Rabbi Eliezer that Eidei Chasima alone are sufficient, why did he articulate his view Eidei Mesira Karsi? He should have said Af Eidei Mesira Karsi. which is more accurate because that means either this or that, even Eidei Masira, but also Eidei Chasima. So that's the question that people pose. We'll get to the answers in just a minute. That's the position of the Rif. However, the position of Balei Tosas is that there is mutual exclusivity in both directions, by which I mean that just as we said a moment ago, Rabbi Meir rejects Rabbi Eliezer. If there are no signatures on the document, it's not an effective contract. And at the end of the day, even if there are witnesses who are present at the, handing over of the document, doesn't do anything. So too in the other direction. According to Rabbi Eliezer, you need to have witnesses who are present, and if you don't, then nothing happens, meaning Eidei Chasim alone are insufficient. If you have Eidei Masira present at the time of the handing over the document, then the Eidei Chasima serve a function of raya, meaning they can be brought to court to prove that it all happened properly, including the likely presence of Eidei Masira. But in the end of the day, they don't effectuate, they don't legally create a change of title if we're talking about, a gift or a real estate deal, and they don't occasion a divorce in the case of Gittin or a Shtar Kiddushin. They don't create the marriage, etc. Only Eidei Masira.
And this is not a problem with Reish Lakish's position on a shtar strength.
No, because what Reish Lakish is speaking about is edus. He's not speaking about the koach kinyan of the shtar. Reish Lakish is telling you it's a great question. Reish Lakish says, "Edom hakasumim ala shtar nasa kamisha nechker oidusim bebezdin." That's a statement strictly about the power of signed witnesses to be effective in attesting to, meaning in verifying, in providing evidence that something took place. But Reish Lakish has nothing to do with the question in Hilchos Kinyanim, not Hilchos Edus, but Hilchos Kinyanim, or Hilchos Gerushin, or Hilchos Ishus, which is what component of the contract, is validates it.
Even though she has the chazaka that she's holding.
No, so we know it was maybe given to her, but if it was given to her in a way that doesn't
erroneously, I get it.
Yeah.
Is there some overarching reason that it seems like the whole discussion is meant to sort of create some space between the concept of Edus and Kinyan? In other words, is there an overarching value to that? Because it just seems like that's what they're all struggling, well, not necessarily struggling, but that's what this was about. That Edus could be fine, but it's not.
There are. I'll put it this way: Edus and Kinyan are two different things. I think it's. I would say it. I'll say it this way. Well, first, let me just add. Since you formulated it that way, which is a good way. So let me just add. So for Rabbi Meir, we should, what we've been trying to explain also is that the argument between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Eliezer can be looked at in two ways. In addition to this massive, debate among all the Mefarshim, whether or not, we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer, that Eidei Masira Karsi. So it's really not just an abstract discussion. If you have a shtar Eidei Chasima without Eidei Masira, according to half the halachic world, you're okay, and according to the other half, you're not. So that's it's you can't have like a more consequential argument. We paskin like Rabbi Eliezer, and we're trying to figure out whether if you only have Eidei Chasima, that creates a kinyan or not. Having said that, that's the practical argument. The conceptual question in all of this is the difference between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir, whether you need Eidei Chasima, this witness to sign, or witnesses to be present at the handing over the document, is that kind of like a detailed argument, just an argument about, filling in, the method of executing a divorce, etc. So it's about details. Or is it really a fundamental conceptual argument? You mean two different, very different, almost mutually exclusive perspectives on how this kinyan works. And that's going to be relevant to the point that you raised. If you give me just one more second, I'll get back to that. Meaning, for Rabbi Meir, who says Edi Chasima Karsi, the heavy weight of the significance of witnesses signing on, the benefit is that they are permanent raya. As long as you have the document, you don't need anything else. Because the document based on Reish Lakish, that you quoted before, says everything was done kadasu kadid. Didn't fall out of anybody's pocket and coincidentally be picked up by someone else. We connect the dots, we figured out what happened here, and it's good evidence, the koach of witnesses even, that this is all, what happened.
But it has a major deficiency. It doesn't have a nasna.
Yeah. On the other hand, is a deficiency, and that is that no one actually was present physically, at the moment when the change took place, which is the moment of the Masira. Everybody agrees
that the pasuk specifically requires.
What?
Which the pasuk specifically requires.
No, the pasuk doesn't require that somebody be present it requires that there be an exchange of documents. The pasuk says the kasav law sefer krisus v'nasim biyada. It doesn't tell you where the Edom are, right? So, but the point is that Rabbi Meir has a glaring weakness, even as he has a glaring, we'll call it a glaring, even as he has an obvious benefit. The obvious benefit is that there's omnipresent, ubiquitous raya, right? The huge glaring problem is that the Edom are not there for the main event. And therefore, what is it that makes the main event a main event? So the answer probably is that the nature of the Kinyan Shtar, according to Rabbi Meir, is connected to the evidence. And that's kind of, you asked me that question a second ago, like what is the relationship between these two things? For Rabbi Meir, the Kinyan is giving him a raya, because part of a Kinyan, part of a change of title, is a demonstrative or symbolic way of conveying to someone or conveying to the world that someone is the new owner, that someone has title, over, a particular, whether it's a piece of land or the relationships have changed in terms of marriage and divorce. So Rabbi Meir's position is that when you provide evidence to the other party that will substantiate their claim of a change of status, then that is what creates the change of status. You're empowering them. Let's take a field, for example, real estate deal. By giving you evidence that seems to indicate that there was a real estate deal, right? Placing the evidence in your hands is an act of empowerment. And empowerment is a symbolic form of Kinyan. I'm making you, what?
Didn't I miss something here? I mean, because there's two things in the pasuk: the kosav law, the nasna law.
Right.
So either the argument is which one is really which is the ikar and which is the tuffle here.
Well, I think everybody will agree.
Or perhaps there is no ikar and tuffle.
Right.
You can have either one. So it's almost.
Yeah, why can't they both be essential?
They are both essential. Everybody agrees. Everybody agrees you need Bakasav, and everybody agrees you need Vanessa.
It's almost
The
circular.
question is, what is code?
Somebody has a weakness because he believes one or the other. Either one is equally cogent. I mean, one can make a position either one.
In fact, you need both. The question is, as you say, which one is the trigger for effectuating the change? So for Rabbi Meir, it's creating the raya and in placing it in the hands of the other. Why is that a Kinyan? Because you're empowering him by giving him evidence, by making him as self-sufficient in defending his claim. That itself is a form of a symbolic way of handing him. That's Rabbi Meir's view. Rabbi Eliezer says the opposite. He also has a glaring weakness and a huge, benefit. His huge benefit is that at the actual moment, timing-wise, the moment of change is the moment of the Masira. So if you have the Edom at that point and they're formalizing that the symbolic handing over of the contract is the handing over of title, or in the case of get, the handing over of the get, right, is what changes the relationship between former husband and wife, right, and now establishes that they're no longer a husband and wife. So the witnesses are there and they see that. So that's the moment of Kinyan, time-wise, and that's a huge benefit. But of course, the glaring omission is that there's nothing written in this document. So 15 minutes later, right, when the Edom went on their trip to Alaska, right, all there is a piece of paper that says some words on it, which doesn't have to mean anything. So the idea, this is the explanation is that Rabbi Eliezer is focusing on the Kinyan part of the Kinyan, and Rabbi Meir is focusing on the Raya part of the Kinyan. So to answer your question, which was a good question, let's take a step back for a moment and think about something else. The Rambam, just to highlight it, the Rambam wrote 14 books called Yad HaChazaka, right? Meaning he divided Jewish law into 14 different sections, 14 categories. So he has a sefer called Kinyan. Of course, he has a sefer called, Mada and Ava and Zmanim and so on and so forth, and Kedusha and Avoda and Karbanos. I mean, he has many, there are 14 of them, right? But I'm just trying to highlight, in the world of civil law, the name of one of the 14 books is Sefer Kinyan. The name of another one of the books is Sefer Shoftim. Kinyan is a whole book in the Rambam that deals with how you change, title, right? So in Sefer Kinyan of the Rambam, in Hilchos Mechira, the Rambam talks about how you, exchange real estate and how you exchange mobilia, kesef and shtar and Kinyan chazaka and Kinyan sudar and meshicha and hagba and mesira, and so on and so forth. And agav, there are numerous. There's a whole, and what do you need for a sale, and what do you need for a gift? A chotzer, excellent. So what do you need in all these? That's sefer. Now, when we're talking about the role of shtar and Edi Mesira and Edi Chasima Karsi, we're talking in the Choshen Mishpat terms, in civil law terms, we're talking about sefer, we're talking about, that sefer in the Rambam, sefer Kinyan. We're talking about how, of course, we're also talking about Hilchos Ishus and sefer Nashim, because, we're talking about the change in status, which is also a Kinyan, between a husband and a wife. But the point is, that's what we're talking about. But Sefer Shoftim has Hilchos Edus. Shoftim means judges, meaning jurisprudence, law. So, legal procedure. That's Hilchos Dayanim, Sanhedrin, right? And that's Hilchos Mamrim, when people are recalcitrant. And that is Hilchos, main part of it is Hilchos Edus. What are the laws of evidence? What are the laws of testimony? So you're totally right, meaning when we speak about Edim in a shtar, we're really talking about the intersection of two different aspects of law. One is Raya, evidence, Sefer Shoftim, Hilchos Edus, right? Edim in that Resh Lakish, Edim Hachasumim al Hashtar Nasa Commissionechor Edusam Bebezdin. That is one component that we are certainly speaking about. And when, for example, when the Mishnah says, Eina Edim, Chosmim, I get Elamishum Tikkun Olam, that for Rabbi Eliezer, the reason for witnesses to sign is, it's beneficial because if they go on a trip or if mortality catches up to them, you'll have evidence in that case, then, that's exactly, talking about Hilchos Edus. However, what we're primarily interested in the case of a get or a shtar kiddushin or a shtar mechira that is a shtar kinyan, is not Hilchos Edus in Sefer Shoftim, but Hilchos Sefer Kinyan. And that's where you have this debate between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir, two fundamentally opposite perspectives. Rabbi Eliezer being the one who says, a shtar may serve as a raya, the Edom Shab shtar, but that's beside the point. That's not the component in shtar that really defines it in terms of kinyanim. It's not. And Rabbi Meir says
Rabbi
Meir basically says what David was saying before, which is maybe it's not a coincidence that what's significant about a shtar all equally is the evidence that it provides, maybe providing the evidence is the mode of actual kinyan.
Is
So
that
I'm
a
just trying to
blanket
illustrate
statement?
the two views by kind of highlighting the Rambam's two venues, to kind of underscore the different.
Is that a blanket statement of Rabbi Eliezer or just in Gittin?
The what?
The idea that
In
that
Karsi?
that it's a Kenyan or a Raya. In other words,
No,
the problem with Gittin versus other shtarim is that it has this Nesina aspect to it.
right.
So that
you
seems
don't-
to be the part that's troubling Rabbi Eliezer in the Gittin.
Well, you're right in the sense, meaning put it this way. We read the Mishnah and the Gemara on Pei-Vav Amud Aleph and Pei-Vav Amud Beis, and we read the Mishnah and we read the Gemara here on Gimel Amud Beis and Daled Amud Aleph. So we know that the argument between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir, which applies to Gittin, also applies to Kiddushin, and also applies to Shtar Mecher, Shtar Matana, and even a Shtar Milva. Meaning it does apply. Now there's a debate in the Gemara. There's a view in the Gemara that says Moda, that Kaimelon. There's some debate already in the Sugya in Magaresh and also here and also in other places whether we might not distinguish and say the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer begitin, right, but not b'shar shtaros. And if we do say that, what does that mean? What's the difference between gittin and shar shtaros? So actually, there are two views in the Rishonim.
There's no Nesina component in Shtar Shtaros that at least by the Raisa.
I don't know if it's the Nesina component alone. I'll get back to that in a second. But the way that most Rishonim understand it is a distinction between Choshen Mishpat, civil law, and let's say Ishus or Isurim, Kiddushin, Gittin, Shichur, Eved, as opposed to a sale of a piece of property or a debt things of that sort. However, the Ravid actually makes a more interesting distinction. The Ravid says, no, the distinction when the Gemara says Modo Rabbi, that maybe we paskin against Rabbi Lazar b'shar shtaros, maybe what he means is to distinguish between shtar kinyan and shtar raya no matter where. In other words, let me explain. So let's say you do a real estate deal, but you don't want to effectuate the change of title with the contract. Let's say you want to effectuate the deal with money, which you could, or kinyan chazaka, or kinyan sudar, and you just want to have a shtar as proof.
To eat.
Wasn't there a takonis rabbanon against something like this?
No. What takonis
They were afraid that the transaction takes place before the kinyan, the money moves, that maybe the person won't take care of the field until the kinyan is made or something. Didn't we have that takonis?
Oh. No. That's in Metaltalin. There's a debate in the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, whether some people say Dvar Torah Ma'os Konos, but they made a gzeira that you should only use Mashicha, Shema Yisrafu Chitecha Ba'aliyah. That we're worried that, if money changes hands, but the object is still in the other person's possession,
Won't take care of
then
it.
I won't bother saving it if it's a fire. But that's mobilia. That's metaltalin, and that's a din rabbanan. But the bigger point I'm trying to make is, let's say you want to sell real estate. There are two ways more. For our purposes, the sale of the real estate, the change of title could take place with a contract. And that's the method of changing ownership. That's called a shtar kinyan. But it doesn't have to be. There could be a shtar raya only, meaning, let's say I paid you $1,000, that was the price for the real estate. And through the kesef is doraisa kinyan for karka. There's no gzeira d'Rabbanan either. So, but I want to have evidence of it. So I asked, the sofer to also draw up a shtar. Then the shtar is only a shtar raya because you're not changing the title with the shtar. When we talk about Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir, mostly we're talking about changing title with the shtar.
But if you looked at the shtar in a vacuum, how would you tell the difference?
Well, it's the way that the shtar is written. The shtar.
Does the shtar say this is a shtar kinyan or a shtar raya? It doesn't say it.
Yeah, no, sure there's a difference.
Oh,
The
yeah.
shtar kinyan will say that with this shtar,
Uh-huh.
you are changing title. The shtar raya will say
This
that
confirms
the
it's
shtar confirms that there was a sale that took place with Kesef.
Understand. Yeah.
So maybe Star Kinyan is best understood as like a document of title.
A what?
A document of title.
It's a contract.
Whereas
Isn't
the
that a contract?
Star Raya is not a title.
Right. Put it this way, Star Raya is not a contract.
Right,
Or if it is, it's or maybe it's a
It's more akin to a receipt, no?
yeah, it's exactly something like that. But but right, this is anyway. So this is the fundamental argument between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir.
Now,
What we were trying to do last week was to explain the position of. Oh, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, no. Just one thing is, in fact, the whole debate that Romero created by the fact that in Gittin it says the Kosav law, because if you go back to Kedushin, you have an equal kinyan in Kesef, and none of this comes up in Kesef. This debate, right? Of do you need a star?
No, right. I mean, the only kinyan that you need that is exclusively done by star is a get.
So what if we didn't have this? So
one of the three methods of kiddushin is also bishtar, and that's also biblical.
Right, but
if
you didn't have get in some illusion world, where would there be an opportunity other than for the machlokas to even originate?
No, because there's still shtar mecher, there's still shtar matana. These are also kinyanim. I mean, we think that there's evidence. There are psukim that are the source for kinyan shtar there as well.
But do we have any other place other than Gittin with that elicits the machlokas like this?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The discussion in the Gemara and Gittin and the end of Bal Basra and here in the beginning of Gittin that we're learning on Gimel and Beis and Daled and Aleph, they're all discussing. It's clear from the Gemara that Rabbi Eliezer's position applies not only in Gittin and not only in Gittin and Kedushin, and not only in Gittin and Kedushin and Shtar Shechur or Eved, but also in Choshen Mishpat. The only question is that we paskin like him everywhere. So the assumption that it applies.
In those spots, you have a pasuk that says because of love and nasam. That's what I'm saying. In other words, here you have
you don't need you have a pasuk that says that there's a shtar, because of basefer v'chasom, but you don't have and v'hoid ba'edim, so that sounds like chasima according to some and are not others. You have some psukim, but remember what's unique to Gittin either way is something else, and that is, in addition to being exclusively accomplished through shtar, it's the only thing, is also there are other aspects because of the pasuk and because of the nature of Gittin that are unique to get.
Right.
For example, lishma. Right, the idea of the kosav law means lishma, as we've been discussing. That's how we got into this whole discussion. Right, the Mishnah says that if you bring a get from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, you have to be the shliach, the agent, has to say b'fanei nechtav, b'fanei nechtav. How did we get to this whole discussion? Because the Gemara says, why do you need b'fanei nechtav and nechtam? If the word v'kasav means, according to Rabbi Elazar, only means v'kasav because there is no chasima, there's no signing, and the word v'kasav, according to Rabbi Meir, emphasizes the chasima, so you don't need v'ksiva. So who's the one who says you need v'kasav and v'kasav? That's how the Gemara got into this whole problem.
Yeah,
so
but that's
here in Gittin, just 1 second. In Gittin, there are other factors that are derivative of the argument between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Meir, including, is the lishma the ksiva or the chasima? Or, for example, the psul mechubar, which is, what is mechubar? Mechubar means when you create the get, it's still attached to the ground, and therefore it's mechusar ketzitza lifnei nesina. It says v'kasav la sefer krisis v'nasa biyada. That's a disqualification. So does that mean b'shatz ksiva or chasima? The Gemara says depends on Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Meir. I mean, there are aspects of Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Meir's argument that apply only in Gittin because only get has certain additional requirements of purity of motive, of there not being any kind of obstacle or break between the writing and the delivering of the get, things of that sort. But the basic argument, what is a contract? Is it defined by the signatures or by the presence of witnesses at the time when the object is handed over, that argument applies to shtar matana, to shtar mecher, possibly even to shtari milva. That is a broader argument. Yeah, the Chazan had a question.
No, the idea perhaps of befanai nichtav befanai nechtam could be nechtam, yeah. That could be that this requirement, it's because it is the shaliach who is bringing the get.
It is only when the shliach brings a get.
Yeah, I'm sorry?
It's only when the shliach brings a get.
That's right. But because otherwise, if the husband gives it direct to the woman,
right.
Then there is no need for it. So maybe that's why we have more restrictions if it's not the husband himself who is giving the get.
Well, that is true, and we'll get back to that discussion. But that's largely. I'm just trying to explain how did the Gemara on Daf Gimel Amud Beis and Daled Amud Aleph, how did they get into this topic? The answer is they got into it because the Mishnah is trying to understand who is the author of the takana nechtam when there's a shliach. It may happen very rarely. It may be limited to a shliach, but we still need to understand like who the author of that gezerah is. And the Gemara was seeking to identify who he was. And the difficulty that they encountered was precisely the fact that, everything should be about the chasim or everything should be about the ksiva. But, where do you have somebody who is attentive, to both of them? So even if it's rare or 50% or 70% or 20%, it doesn't matter. In the end of the day, we still need to understand who that authority is, and therefore we're working hard to, it forces us, this is the beauty of halachic analysis, right? You encounter, like any legal analysis, but this is just much more. You encounter a difficulty, right? And it forces you, it pressures you to examine, re-examine, reassess, some of your initial, default assumptions. So like what would happen in this Gemara was, we're trying to see who is the author of the Mishnah. We're saying it doesn't seem like Rabbi Eliezer, it doesn't seem like Rabbi Meir.
Right.
Right? But now we've been pushed to look at them again, since it's got to be somebody. So now we've expanded our understanding, Moja Rabbi Eliezer b'mezuyik mitocho, which we spoke about a lot last week. So, and once that is true, then, it gets you into the Rif and the Balitosis and etc. So it doesn't matter how frequent the case is, either way you have to account for it. Once you have to account for it, you're forced to examine certain core topics in a very, in some cases, in a fresh way, in a way that, challenges, some of the previous assumptions. And then you may end up, with a whole, different direction or different understanding. That's why, Torah is never static. You know what I mean? It's always dynamic, because every question, every perspective in theory, can motivate you, or can enlighten you or illuminate for you, some other small point or big point, as the case may be. So this is actually a good example of getting back, so we can get back to the Ravid, to the Ran for a minute. So everybody with me so far? So we have this argument between the Bali Tosas, we'll call it, but more than the Bali Tosas, Rashi, Tosas, Balamor, Rush, Tosas Rid, a whole group against another whole group, Rif, Rambam, Ramban, Ravid, Ran, Rajba, etc. And there are a lot of issues that are explored in this context. So the last thing that we were discussing last week, which
so it really agrees with the Rambam in this case, since they're in the same group.
Yes.
Interesting.
Rif and the Rambam, in this case, on this point at least, agree. The Rambam thinks that even though we paskin in the Sirakarsi, that if you were to go the route of Eidei Chasima alone, that would work. If you want to see that, just look at the Rambam for a minute. In Perek Aleph Hilchos Gerushin, this would be on page 3. I'm sorry, it's not 3. It's on page 4. Look at Parak Aleph Hilchos Gerushin. Halacha Tezayin. This is on page 4. The Rambam says, Chosmu bo shnayim, if 2 people sign the get, the avar v'nesano la, and then he goes and he gives it to her, beino leveina, right, without any witnesses, just, the 2 of them alone. Oh, shenim suedim asira psulim, or he tried to give it in front of 2 witnesses. It turns out, unbeknownst to him, that they were related to each other, or one of them is a puzzle. So the Eidei Mesira didn't work. They were disqualified, right? Nimsu Eidei Mesira Psulim. So the Rambam says, Arezeh Kasher. The get is still an effective get. Why? Hol Eidem Shabok Sherim, because the Eidei Chasima who signed it are Ksherim. V'harei get Yotzei Mitachas Yada. And the get is now in the hands of the woman, and it has Eidei Chasima who are Ksherim. And then he adds V'yesh Shahorem Min HaGaonim Shu Pasol. Some of the Gaonim disagreed; they thought it was Pasol. Anyways, so the Rambam, like the Rif, says that if you use Eidei Chasima alone, b'di'eved, that works, and that's against the view of Rashi and Tosas and so on, who say no. If you hold like Rabbi Eliezer, then only Eidei Mesira work. Eidei Chasima alone will never work. Okay.
But is Rashi saying that if the Chasima was good, or if one was good or one wasn't, and even though the one that you felt was important was good, that the other one was deficient, does that make the whole transaction invalid? That was one of the because we have that sometimes, that when you overdo it, which is
no, that's what Mod Rabbi Lazar ben Ziyaf Mitocha you're talking about.
Yeah. So
yeah, but again, for Rashi,
the argument here could be, as you said, or it could be that one side is saying, wait a second, it's true that what was important you did right, but since you were foolish and you had an extra component that you added and you messed up that extra component, somehow that takes away the credibility from the whole.
That's the view of the Rabbi and the Ramban and the Rajba about Moda Rabbi Eliezer. I mean, in the end, the Gemara says, "Who's the author of our Mishnah who says B'fanai Nachtam?" We say it's. I just didn't review it again because we've done it already, but it's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says Eidei Mesira Karsi. So why do you need B'fanai Nachtam? So that's what you're saying. He explains. He says it's true that you don't need Eidei Chasima. But once you have Eidei Chasima, they better be Lishma. Now, Rashi and Tosas think that that's a Din D'Rabbanan, but the Ravid and the Ramban and the Rajba and so on think that that's a Din D'Oraisa, along the lines of a little bit of what you're saying.
But even if it's a D'Rabbanan, you have a problem if you made a get that way.
What?
Even if it's a D'Rabbanan, if you did a get without deficiency, you got a problem.
Yeah, for sure. Although it's better to have a D'Rabbanan problem than a D'Oraisa problem, but for sure.
Although from a practical point in this day and age, it won't help you much.
Well, I mean, in terms of in terms of Vlad Mams, I mean, the Mishnah on Peivav and Aleph, quoted here in Gimel on the base, says Gimel Gittin Psulim, which means they're Pasal D'Rabbanan, but the Vlad is not a Mamzer.
Oh, okay, right.
So that's still a big.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so what I want to get back to is the Ran, which we were talking about last time. So just to because that's going to be the introduction to our next point. Yeah. So you mentioned before, the Rif. One of the questions that's asked against the Rif is why doesn't he say Af Eidei Mesira Karsi? He says, I'm sorry, Af Eidei Mesira Karsi. He should have said Eidei is instead of saying Eidei Mesira Karsi. It would have been more accurate for him to say Af Eidei Mesira Karsi, which means even or also, because he thinks that both work. If both work, why not say both? It's more accurate, right?
Right.
So the Ramban's answer to that question is a technical one. Ramban says, listen, number one, if it had said even,
Uh-huh.
It said also, you might have thought you needed
I
both.
didn't take a look.
You might have thought you needed both. That's number one.
Well, yeah,
More
yeah, but I
important,
don't want to eat
Ramban
things.
says, listen, we want to encourage Eidei Mesira and not Eidei Chasima.
Yeah, you keep
The
everything.
reason is because in the case of Eidei Chasima, it's vulnerable.
Oh, Jesus
You,
Christ, it's like me. Yeah, of course I'll eat it.
yeah,
What are you looking?
Delicious,
in-
it's perfect.
yeah.
I think
I think
No,
somebody has to
no, no.
put your,
Somebody has to go on mute.
on mute. Hello?
What are you gonna say to me? Well, I mean,
Oh,
what am I gonna say? If you want, then you eat the both of them. I
Okay.
ate an enormous amount. already
Everybody can
today.
hear, hopefully?
It's
Yeah.
crosstalk.
What?
Now it's good. Now it's good. There was some
Okay, good.
interference.
So, yeah, so the Ramban says, listen, it doesn't say af because we have a preference, which is what the Rif says. We prefer Eidei Mesira, they're Ikar, they're Lechatchila. And the reason they're Lechatchila is for technical reasons. If you take Eidei Chasima, you have to hold on to the record. If you have Eidei Mesira, you can always
Anyway,
fight
you
the guy
choose.
and take him to court or invite him to court.
I think this will be
However,
just
the
as tasty.
Ran has a very different take on the whole story. And this is what we were reading last week. And I want to get back to this. The Ran came up with what I call a unified theory of the whole topic. The Ran said everybody made a mistake when they were interpreting the Rif. He said, and especially the Balei Tosfos and the Balamor, all the opponents of the Rif made a big mistake. They totally misunderstood what he was saying. In what way? They all thought that what he said was, Eliezer
Let me
thinks
try.
either Eidei Mesira
Let me just
Karsi
try one of these.
or
Did you
Eidei
take one of these
Chasima
things?
Karsi. One or the other.
What are they?
It's
Right?
fake chicken.
In other words, the Eidei Chasima of which work according to Rabbi Meir work also independently for Rabbi
Do me a
Eliezer.
favor.
What?
But in fact, that is not the
No,
case.
Take one for
It's not true.
tomorrow.
What's really true is that only Eidei Mesira are Karsi,
Mm.
I want you to have.
only Eidei Mesira are Karsi,
No, listen.
but Eidei Chasima
Excuse me,
serve
somebody's got
as
a mic open
visual,
and is talking in the
Steve.
background.
We can't follow. We can't.
Mesira.
Because you heat it up.
Is that clear? I know it can't be too clear, but we're
We're
trying.
getting a lot of crosstalk for some reason.
Perfect.
Steve,
Jennifer,
let me try to call.
Yeah.
so good, and it's your kind of food.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's not.
Please,
So-
Jennifer.
The
Yeah,
idea
these things always
of the
look like
Ran
No, you
is,
never get.
does somebody have the
Steven,
ability
do.
to do like,
Stop it.
I'm trying to find his phone number. Steve, 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 please go on mute.
Oh, I thought I was on mute all along.
Okay,
I'm
I saw you did.
sorry.
No problem.
that's
Thank you,
okay, it's
Believe
Steve.
okay.
You're hearing
All right.
all sorts of
You owe us a
nonsense
tennis
here.
match. We all get a tennis lesson. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Goodbye.
Okay, so the point is that what the Ran says is that the reason that Rabbi Eliezer says Eidei Mesira Karsi, not Eidei Af Eidei Mesira Karsi, is because even though he agrees technically with Rabbi Meir that Eidei Chasima can function, he doesn't think they're functioning the same way they're functioning for Rabbi Meir. For Rabbi Meir, Eidei Chasima work as Eidei Raya, and their critical moment is their moment of Chasima. And the critical moment of the entire shtar is the initiation of the document itself, the Das HaMischayim. But according to Rabbi Eliezer, he says Eidei Mesira Karsi. Eidei Mesira Karsi means only that the Mesira requires evidence. The only thing is, because of the Din Reish Lakish, which many of you asked about earlier, so it turns out that Eidei Chasima can testify virtually, right, about the Mesira. And therefore the Ram says, the five, I'm not going to go through all of them, I did this last week, but I want to get us to where we need to be right now. The 5 or 6 questions that all the Rishonim ask against the Rif, in addition to the linguistic question. The linguistic question is the answer is now obvious. You're not going to say Af Eidei Mesira Karsi because it isn't true. What's true? Exclusively Eidei Mesira Karsi. How come Eidei Chasima work? Not because they're Karsi, but because they're Eidei Mesira. There are real Eidim Mesira, there are virtual Eidim Mesira. So it's the Mesira and its virtual Eidim that substitute for real Eidim that is Kores. That's not what Rabbi Meir said. Rabbi Meir said, Eidei Chasima are Kores. So all of the Dinim, the Rishonim asked all sorts of questions. We discussed it a little bit last week. Like the Gemara says in Ksubas, right? What happens if one man, Ruvain, sells his property to two people on the same day? Or not sell, let's say he gives it as a gift. Let's say Ruvain gives Shimon and Levi each his whole property as a gift on Tuesday. He doesn't write the time in the contract. He didn't tell them that he was giving it to each of them. Each one he called in, each one he said, "You're my best friend. I want to give you this piece of real estate. I wouldn't think of giving it to anybody else except for you." Right? Then at the end of the day, it turns out there are two of them.
Two best
Right?
friends.
So the Gemara says, if you hold like Rabbi Eliezer, we don't know what to do now because there are two people holding a contract for the same piece of property. So the Gemara says, if you hold like Rabbi Eliezer, the answer is Shuda D'Daini. Shuda D'Daini means the Dayan should speculate, he should try to figure out who the guy really meant to give it to. We should use our instinct.
To figure out what was intended.
Yeah, exactly. But the other view, the Gemara says, is Alibid Rabbi Meir, who says Eidei Chasima Karsi. For him, we say Yachloku. So the Bali Tosis all say, if Rabbi Eliezer really felt that Eidei Chasima work or Eidei Mesira work, either one, why couldn't he also say Yachloku? Eidei Chasima works, right? Or I'll give you another example. The Gemara says a bunch of places. The Mishnah says that if you shouldn't write a shtar or a get on forgeable surface. If either the ink or the surface is forgeable, I mean it's yachal is dai, if you could forge on it easily, you could erase it, then it doesn't work. The Gemara says, whether it works or not should depend on Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Meir. If you hold Eidei Chasima Karsi, it doesn't work. If you hold Eidei Mesira Karsi, it works. Why? Because Eidei Mesira, anyway, the Eidim are there at the moment of the handing over the document. They could see exactly what was written on it at that moment.
Yeah, but there could be also a Eidei Mesira to the other guy.
Say again?
There could be a Eidei Mesira to the other guy because he gave two same.
No, forget. Yeah, right. No. I'm talking about Yachal Uzdayef now.
But where is the Uzdayef here?
No. Two different cases.
What's the legal?
These are two different cases. One case is the case we're talking about before was Shnei Shtaros Hayotzim B'Yom Echad. Do you say Shuda D'Daini or do you say Yachloku? That's one argument. Now I'm talking about a different argument.
Okay.
The Mishnah and the Gemara discuss, can you write a get or a shtar on a surface sheyuchal lihizdayef? Where you can be mistayef, you can erase it.
Yeah.
So the Gemara ends up saying for Rabbi Eliezer, it's no problem. Why? Because for Rabbi Eliezer, the Edom have to be present at the moment anyway. They could see what's written at that moment. Who cares whether he changes it later? Right? However, according to Rabbi Meir, where the whole kinyan is based on the raya of what was prepared in advance before the Mesira, if it's a ksav sheyachal lizdayef, then there's no evidence of anything because you can make a forgery out of it. So the Rishonim all ask, how come there's an argument between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir about these matters? According to the Rif, there should be no argument because even Rabbi Eliezer agrees that Eidei Chasima alone would work. They use the expression that Tosas uses, Dal Eidei Mesira Mehacha. Forget about the Eidei Mesira. Treat them, you could go the route of Eidei Chasima. Says the Ran, in all these cases, the Rishonim who are attacking the Rif are all assuming that just because the Rif said that Eidei Chasima independently work, they're assuming that the Eidei Chasima that work according to Rabbi Eliezer are the exact same as the ones that work according to Rabbi Meir. Says the Ran, it's not true. There's a fundamental argument. technically, Eidei Chasima work according to Rabbi Meir, and they work according to Rabbi Eliezer, but they work in a totally different way. For Rabbi Meir, they work as Raya, and therefore, if it's Yochel Hizdayev, or if it's Shnei Shtaros, Hayotzim B'Yom Echad, there's no Raya, because objectively, the star, you could forge it, or in the other case, it just says Tuesday, it doesn't say what time. So the evidence in the star is equal for both. You have to say Yakloku. But for Rabbi Eliezer, Eidei Chasima, this is the Ran talking. Eidei Chasima don't work as Eidei Chasima. They work as virtual Eidei Mesira. It's as if there are real Eidim there. But what's the critical moment? Not the Chasim, and what's the critical issue? Not the Raya in the star and the moment of the Chasima, but the Mesira, the handing over the document. Just that the Eidim, as Raya, can testify that there was a proper Mesira. So that's how the Ran, that's a very good example. The Ran has he took all the questions of the Rishonim, he came up with, he said, you know what, they're all based on a certain premise. He said, I don't think that premise is true. And he answered every single question against the Rif. The linguistic questions, the substantive questions, etc. So now that leaves us to where we are now. We're almost out of time, but we have a few more minutes. So now this leaves us to discuss the question of what we call Eidei Ki, now that we know all of this. So look at the new Mar Makomos. Everybody have them, right? Excellent. So the new Mar Makomos start with a Gemara, which we're going to get back to, which is his introduction, and a Tosas. So first I'm going to read the Tosas, then I'll go back to the Gemara. The Tosas is the Kaimelan Halachic Rabbi Begitin. If you have a Shas Gemara, it's the bottom Tosas on Daled Omid Aleph.
1 second, please. 1 second.
It's in the sheets on page 1.
No, I have the Gemara, so I'd like to look at it. So
Okay,
where is it again, Rabbi? Where?
Daled Omid Aleph.
Okay.
4a.
Yes, yes.
Right? The Tosas called the Kaimelan Halacha Rabbi Begitin.
I have it, yeah.
Okay, so now I'd like to do, if you can, is skip down a little bit, because this is what, okay, we'll start reading it. Skip a little bit. The first part of Tosas is where he rejects the Rif. So go down about, 1 second. Do you see where it says Ulefikach Tzarech Li Zaher? It's about 8 or so lines down in the Gemara, about 6 lines down in the sheets.
How many lines in the Gemara? 8, you say?
I think in the Tosas in the Gemara, it's about 8 or 9 lines down. Ulefikach Tzarech Li Zaher.
5, 6.
Let me tell. I'll check exactly. 1 second.
7. Okay, whatever. I'll find it.
Ulefikach Tzarech Li Zaher. Everybody have that? Yeah. 1 second. No, I made a mistake. In the Tosas, it's 5 lines down, or 6 lines down in the Tosas. Everybody have that? And it's 8 lines down, I think, in the sheets. Ulefikach tzarech li zaher. Everybody have it?
Yes, I have
Yes,
it.
if everyone's quiet, that's a good sign.
I have it in the Gemara, yeah. Ulefikach tzarich lizaher.
Ulefikach tzarech li zaher. Therefore, says Tosas, you have to be careful. Shiu edei mesira b'shas nesinas haget. That there were always edei mesira at the time of the giving of the get. Remember, this is Tosas against the Rif. The inu karsi, they're the ones who are effectuating the change in status. The ileka sham edei mesira, in the absence of edei mesira, ena megureshes. Hafagav the Ike de Chasima. Even if there are Ede Chasima on the
Not sufficient.
it will not work.
Yeah.
This is exactly opposed to the Rif and the Rambam. V'lo mahani ede chasima are effective only regarding raya. Ella shem yamusu ede mesira o yelchu lahem lemedina sayam. If the edim die, or they travel and you can't drag them to court because they're out traveling. So what they are effective for, the Eidi Chasima, is proof. Shatinase Eidi Chasima. That she could go ahead with her life. She could remarry with the evidence of the Eidi Chasima, right? Dimistama behechshanasa. Because presumably...
Do we regard them as a Dei Mesira?
No. This is... The Tosas is saying the Eidei Chasima are not good enough to create again. However, if there are Eidei Chasima, we can assume that there were Eidim. We can assume that there were actual living, breathing Eidei Mesira. And since there were living Eidei Mesira at the time of the Mesira, there was a get. And we can use the Eidei Chasima as a raya, not as a kinyan, but as a raya. Kinomina b'sholeach. That's what the Gemara says in Hasholeach, and later on.
Lo tzricha.
Lo tzricha el Rabbi Lazar, damar Eidei Mesira karsi. Takina Rabbanan Eidei Chasima. They made a takana that there should be Eidei Chasima. The zimda demaisi sahadi. Sometimes the Eidim will die. Inami da'azli l'medina sayam. They'll go on a very far trip. And in those circumstances, right, it's good to have Eidei Chasima as a raya at least. V'chein mashra perik basra gabi shnaim shesholkol shnei gitin shmasem shavin nosim shneim lazu kamer gemar de lo krab lazar. I'm skipping all this because we did this already. Kasav Lagarish Sagdola, the Ilu Ablaza Sagi, Bede Chasima, Milo Asik Rablaza Dali de Mesir Mehacha, Bede Chasima Sagi, Elamashmali Olam Boy Rablaza Edi Mesir. Period. We've gone through this. I'm not going to go through it again, but this is Tosas's argument that the Rifin is wrong, that according to the Mandamar Eidi Mesira Karsi, Rabbi Eliezer, Eidi Chasima do not work. Now comes what I'm interested in for now. The Ode, De Rogil Rabbeinu Tam Lomar, says Tosas, Rabbeinu Tam used to say, the Afilu Rabbi Meir, Boy, Eidim B'Shas Nesinas Haget, that even according to Rabbi Meir, who says Eidei Chasima Karsi, and then what does that usually mean? That even if there's no one present when the document is handed over, you don't need it because you have Eidim signed in the document. Says Rabbeinu Tam, not so fast. There's an exception to that rule. You know what that exception is? Gittin. He would also say Shtar Kiddushin for sure. Why? The Ein Davar Shebe'erva Pakos Mishnai. What is he saying? He's now telling us something which we didn't know before, and we'll have to see if everybody agrees to. And that is, remember when the good doctor was raising the question before about the relationship between the Eidos part, the evidence part, right, and the Kinyan part, correct?
Right.
But there's another wild card when it comes to Gittin and Kiddushin. In addition to the evidence, and in addition to the, what it is that effectuates the change, the Kinyan, there's something else, and that is there's a different kind of Eidos required in Gittin v'Kiddushin. That's Eidei Kiyum. We call it Eidei Kiyum. We'll see why, going forward. Eidei Kiyum means, we'll translate it loosely, but not so loosely, as substantiating witnesses. Right?
For what?
How is that different from Eidei Raya?
Is it nechtav or nechtam? Is it
no. So let me explain. The source for this, as we'll see in one moment, because we're going to set it up for next time, is a Gemara in Kiddushin about Kiddushin. Let's say you're Makadish B'Kesef. Right. Most weddings are Kiddushay Kesef, a ring, right?
Right.
But you still need two witnesses. If you didn't have those two witnesses, the whole marriage would be invalid. Even if, let's say there was like a private a secret wedding. Let's say the groom gave the bride, a ring, for the purpose of being married, but there were no witnesses. But they know they did it. They know that he knows, and they both.
On video.
Both
But you
know.
need Adam. You need Adam. I understand. If you don't have Adam, it doesn't work. Let's say
Correct.
that's why we have Adam at a wedding.
So
What?
as differentiated from
What do you mean, so
Raya,
what? So what we're trying to figure out, that's called Eidei Kiyum. You don't have that requirement in Choshen Mishpat, right? If I
what you're differentiating is between Eidei Kiyum, which is actually something that has to be part of the actual act, versus Eidei Raya, which is just proof that the act took place.
Correct. And the Gemara makes this distinction in Kiddushin. So, for example, in Dinei Mamonis, as we'll soon see, like if I give you a matana, or we agree to form a partnership, or we agree to break up a partnership, whatever it is, and we do the right kinyan, and there was no evidence, no witnesses, does the transaction stand or not?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's based on Gemara and Kiddushin that we're going to see in a moment. So Rabbeinu Tam is asking the following question. If you hold like Rabbi Meir that Eidei Chasim Akarsi, right, that takes care of what? That proves that it happened. It also, according to Rabbi Meir, is the methodology of Kinyan Gerushin, right?
There was a kiyum there.
But
There
does
was-
it solve the problem of Eidei Kiyum for Gittin? Or not?
If it
Are
took place-
Eidim for
Why
Raya?
not?
place when the
They're
act
Eidim for Kinyan. Are they Eidim for Kiyum?
Why
it
not?
depends if you consider the Kasima the Kiyum.
Say that again?
Depends if you consider the Chasima the act. If you consider the Chasima the act of divorce, then the signature.
No, but even if the Chasima is Ikar, no one thinks that if you have Eidei Chasima and you have a Chasima, but you don't have a Nesina, nobody thinks that the Gerushin is yet Chal. If it's never given, then nothing happens. So the Maisa Gerushin, the Chalos Gerushin, is certainly at the time of the Nesina Saget.
Okay, that's obvious. Listen,
Right. So no. So now the question is, can the same witnesses that serve as Raya and that serve as the Kinyan Get, can they also serve as Eidei Kiyum or not? So the Chiddush Rabbeinu Tam said no. I'll look at it again one more time. The Ode Ragil Rabbeinu Tam Lomar. Rabbeinu Tam was accustomed to say. Also, it's an interesting phrase, right? Ragil Rabbeinu Tam Lomar. I guess this is one of his things that he used to say. Because the truth is, if we didn't have this Tosas on Dalet and Aleph, it doesn't appear so many other places. It's such a crucial doctrine. But Rabbeinu Tam used to say, "Fidul Rabbi Meir," even though Rabbi Meir says Eidei Chasim Akarsi, and that's the Davar Hamagarish, that's what effectuates the Gerushin. Of course, once there is a Nesina, still Eidim B'Shas Nesina Saget, you still need Eidei Mesira, not as Eidei Mesira, but as Eidei Nesina Saget, meaning during the Mesira, the Ein Davar Shebe'erva Pakos Mishnayim, because of the requirement of two witnesses in marriage and divorce. Now, does anybody argue with? One second.
Would Rabbi Ron's virtual serve to accomplish that?
That's what I was setting up here. So let's before we get to that, does anybody disagree with this Rabbeinu Tam? Sure, the Rambam and the Rif. Go back to the Rambam that we read before. Perek Aleph, Halacha Tes Zayin. Look on page 4. One of the Rambams, I'm sorry, is it 4? Do I keep getting it wrong?
Rambam Hilchos Gerushin Perek Aleph.
Perek Aleph, yeah, Halacha Tes Zayin. Well, look at Tezvav and Tezayin. Look at Tezvav and Tezayin. You know what? Look earlier. Look at Yud Gimel and then Tezvav. Look at Yud Gimel. That's on top of the page. Minayin Sheit Nenela B'fnei Eidim. Everybody have that?
Yeah.
How do you know that you have to give a get in the presence of witnesses? What is that? Edei Kiyum, right?
Yeah.
Harei Omer, because the Torah says Al Pi Shnayim Eidim Al Shlosh Eidim Yakum Davar, based on 2 or 3 Eidim Yakum Davar. V'yefshar Shatia Zu Ayom Erva. It's impossible to think that she is prohibited to the whole world today. Habal Leba Misas Bezdin, and if she violates that marriage contract, she's going to be, committing a capital crime. And tomorrow she's free. She can do whatever she wants below Eidim without any evidence. Therefore, you need Edei Kiyum. You need witnesses. Wait. You need 2 witnesses. But so far the Ram didn't tell us, are they Edei Chasima or are they Edei, are the signatures in the document good enough? Now look, next halacha. Takonis Chachamim. It's a rabbinic enactment. Shiu Eidim Chos Malaget, that we want the Eidim to sign on. Why? Shema Yitin Get B'fnei Shnayim B'Yamusu, because in case the witnesses die, right? V'nimsa Get Shebiyada Kecheres Mecheres Adama. If you don't have Edei Chasima, then it just becomes a piece of paper, because you don't have the witnesses to back it up if there's some sort of challenge. Therefore, they legislated that they should testify by signing. Nonetheless, it's still better nosa b'fnei shnayim, to give it in the presence of 2 people, even though they're also signing. It can be the same ones. They can do double duty. They can sign and be present. Why? But is the Ram saying this as the Chatchila or B'diavad?
Not only that, he's not.
Wait. Before we comment, might as well get a little more facts. Next halacha. Chasmu bo shnayim. Let's say you have 2 Edei Chasima. The Avar v'nasu beino lebeino, and he disregarded the suggestion of halacha tesvav that it's better to have both. He only has Edei Chasima. Or shenimsu Edei Mesira psulim. He tries to do both, but the Edei Mesira turned out to be psulim. Now, this is exactly Rabbeinu Tam's case, right? You have Edei Chasima. We know they work in shtaros, as shtaros. Do they work for Edei Kiyum? Hareza kosher, says the Rambam. Hoil the Edim shabo ksherim. Hare haget yotze v'takas yada. So the Rambam disagrees with Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam says, or does he? On the surface, what does Rabbeinu Tam? Now again, there's a difference here. Rabbeinu Tam is speaking about Rabbi Meir.
Right.
The Rambam doesn't paskin like Rabbi Meir. The Rambam paskins like Rabbi Eliezer, except that the Rambam, like the Rif, thinks that even Rabbi Eliezer thinks that Edei Chasima alone are effective. So are the Edei Chasima of Rabbi Eliezer, according to the Rif and the Rambam, interchangeable with the Edei Chasima of Rabbi Meir? One would think so. But now we know that the Ran came up, right, with his unified theory, right? The Ran, revolutionized, the whole understanding of the Rif, even though the Ramban didn't go along with the Ran.
What is the Ran holding like Rabbeinu Tam about the necessity for Pochos Mishtayim by Arab?
Well, we don't know what the Rif and the Rambam think according to Rabbi Meir, because they never told us. I mean, if we could interview them, it would be great, right? We know that factually, this question of Edei Chasima that work for a shtar, can they also work for Edei Kiyum? We know that Rabbeinu Tam, speaking about the real Rabbi Meir, says no. And we know that the Rif and the Rambam, speaking about Rabbi Eliezer's Edei Chasima, says yes. So let me say it this way. One would have thought that they're identical. It's the same question. Can Edei Chasima serve the function of Edei Kiyum? If anything, I would have thought maybe even in the other direction. If Rabbeinu Tam thinks that even according to Rabbi Meir, who is the king of Edei Chasima, If Eidei Chasima, which according to Baalei Tosfos, right, is the only thing that works according to Rabbi Meir, right? And it's only Eidei Chasima work only according to Rabbi Meir, and yet they're not good enough for Eidei Kiyum. You would think that for Rabbi Eliezer, who has, for the Rif, who has both Eidei Mesira or Eidei Chasima, certainly Eidei Chasima, it's not the only game in town. Certainly it wouldn't be good. However, if you hold like the Ran, it could be there's no argument at all. Why? What have we been saying? What did the Ran say? He doesn't say it about this. Let me make it clear. But what does the Ran say? The Ran says the Eidei Chasima of Rabbi Meir
are acting as
Raya. The Eidei Chasima of Rabbi Eliezer are virtual Eidei Mesira. So is it possible that the Ran will tell you, you can't get Eidei Kiyum out of Eidei Chasima, but you can get Eidei Kiyum out of virtual Eidei Mesira?
That's hard to buy, because you can't have something be stronger than the real thing.
No, it's not stronger. Maybe it's just not weaker. It only has to compare. It doesn't have to compare.
The Eidei Chasima can't serve as Eidei Kiyum.
Remember,
How
the
can the
Ran's
virtual Eidei Chasima serve as Eidei Kiyum?
the Ran's Eidei Chasima are not virtual Eidei Chasima of Rabbi Meir. They're virtual Eidei Mesira of Rabbi Eliezer.
But they are first, before they become that, they're Eidei Chasima. And
No, but they're not functioning as Eidei Chasima. They're not functioning.
Is that they're transformed magically, so to speak, into virtual Eidei Mesira.
No.
To do that, you can't be stronger than that which you originated from.
But they're not trying to imitate or approximate Rabbi Meir's Eidei Chasima. They're trying to approximate Rabbi Eliezer's Eidei Mesira. So your argument would make sense if I told you that real Eidei Mesira don't work, but virtual Eidei Mesira work. You'd say, how can the virtual be better than the real? But real Eidei Mesira work. We just want to know, do even virtual work? But what are we comparing it to? We're comparing virtual Eidei Mesira to actual Eidei Chasima. Right?
But not to belabor it, but the only way they became virtual Eidei Mesira, they
Right.
still have to come from a valid Eidei Chasima.
That's
And
fine.
if
There
Eidei
are Eidei
Chasima is
Chasima.
missing something in the validity, then they cannot transform to virtual
Right,
Eidei.
but it's still an open question, is what I'm trying to say. So, but I think that there's a different perspective, which is reason to argue. And that is the question of what really is the nature of Eidei Kiyum. Like, what are Eidei Kiyum really about? Our Eidei Kiyum, this is what I want to discuss next week when we pick up with this. In Ishus, you require Eidei Kiyum. You require the presence of Eidim, right? Not just the evidence of the Eidim. Correct? Is that because their role of Eidim is qualitatively totally different, and it's kind of what I call a solemnizing presence, something that lends formality and stature to the occasion, and which depends on the actual presence of living, breathing Eidim, in which case virtual Eidei Mesira may not be enough? Or is the idea that in Dinei Mamadus and Choshen Mishpat and civil law, if you want to risk it and take your chances and do something without evidence, you can do that? But in Ishus, you need Eidei Kiyum not because of their solemnizing presence, but because the stakes are so great that the halacha will not leave it to the personal choice or risk of husband and wife to decide, you know what? If somebody argues, somebody challenges us, we'll worry about it then. But meanwhile, we're married.
Isn't it more simple than that? That is simply part of the ingredient description of what the kedushin, for example, consists of.
Well, you're taking what I'm going to try to show next week is that there is a massive debate, another one, about Eidei Kiyum. Is Eidei Kiyum tzorech birur, or is Eidei Kiyum something very different? It's about substantial, like we're saying. It's about
some kind of a final solution.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to discuss next week. This argument between Rabbeinu Tam and the Rambam. if that either, again, one possibility is it just depends on how you understand Eidei Chasima. Are they virtual Eidei Masira? You need Eidei Masira. These are Eidei Masira. Is that good enough? That's one way to explain the argument, in which case maybe Rabbeinu Tam and Rambam don't even argue. It's just that they're talking about two different Eidei Chasima, the Eidei Chasima of Rabbi Meir and the Eidei Chasima of Rabbi Eliezer, according to the Ran. That's one option. The other option, which I want to get to next week, is whether Eidei Kiyum depends on a whole different category, meaning presence, right? Meaning of formalizing, Eidim who lend prestige and formality, to the proceeding, which I think is what you're saying. I'm going to try to show you that the Ritva in the name of the Ra'ah says that, Reb Chaim says that. I believe that's what Rabbeinu Tam really was saying. Or whether or not the difference between Eidim, what we call Eidim Birur, Eidim who clarify, and Eidei Kiyum who substantiate, meaning who formalize, maybe that difference is much smaller. And maybe the real requirement of Eidei Kiyum is more the idea that you have to have Vada, you have to guarantee Birur. It's not so much they're Eidei Kiyum, they're guaranteed Eidei Birur. In which case, Eidei Chasima should be fine, even without the Ran, because the Din of Reish Lakish tells us what happened. We know what happened, right? So that's what I want to pick up with next week in these Mar Makomos that you have in front of you. Okay?
Sure. Thank you so much,
Wish you
Rabbi.
all a good week.
Have a good night. Thank you.
And, to be continued.
Thank you, everybody.